Hello. I always thought betrayal had a smell. Something like cheap perfume lingering too long on expensive fabric, or the artificial sweetness of lipstick covering up a sour truth. Turns out, I was wrong. It doesn't smell. It doesn't have a taste or a sound. It's quiet. Subtle. A whisper in the air when she stays out just a little too late. A flicker of hesitation when she kisses you goodnight. Betrayal isn't loud, it's patient. It waits for you to notice it, lets you sit with it, lets it settle in your gut like a sickness you can't quite name. And by the time you realize it's there, it's too late. Or at least, that's what she thought. I found out on a Tuesday. Nothing special. Just a regular evening, the kind where the world moves on as if nothing is wrong. I was sitting in my office, wrapping up a presentation when my phone vibrated. A message. One I wasn't meant to see. Last night was amazing. I can't wait until he's out of the way again. I'll call you later. Zoxo. It took me a moment. A long, slow moment where my brain tried to reason with itself. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe she meant to send it to me. Maybe. No, I'm not that kind of man. The kind that buries his head in the sand. The kind that ignores the obvious because it's too painful. I'm a strategist. A problem solver. A man who doesn't act on impulse but on calculation. And at that moment, the only calculation I cared about was how to turn this situation into something I could control. I didn't react. Not visibly, at least. I let the weight of it settle, let it sink into my bones, let it burn away any trace of emotion that might have clouded my judgment. She thought she was playing a game, slipping away into someone else's arms while I lived in blissful ignorance. But what she didn't realize, what she never understood, was that I don't lose. Ever. I locked my phone, exhaled slowly, and smiled. She was going to regret this. The first thing I did was gather information. Not just text her late-night absences, but real information. Patterns. Hotel receipts. A second phone number. A name. A face. He was younger. Predictable. One of those types who thinks he's clever because he managed to sneak around behind my back. Arrogant enough to think he was smarter than me. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. For the next few days, I played my part perfectly. The loving husband. The doting partner. I told her I'd been feeling disconnected lately, that we should do something special. Something to rekindle the spark. How about a trip? I suggested over dinner, watching her expression carefully. She hesitated for half a second before smiling, all fake enthusiasm and bright eyes. That sounds amazing, she said, squeezing my hand. We really need this. Oh, we did. Just not in the way she thought. I planned everything meticulously. A luxury vacation, something out of a dream. Exotic beaches, private resorts, candlelit dinners. The kind of trip that made people jealous. And she, the brilliant actress that she was, played along. She laughed, she held my hand, she kissed me like a devoted wife. And all the while, she had no idea that I already knew. See, the thing about betrayal is that it only works when the other person is blind to it. The moment you see it for what it is, the power shifts. And I was about to shift it so hard she'd never recover. I had a plan. A perfect, beautiful plan. One that would make sure she understood exactly what she had done. Not just a punishment. Not just an exit. No, that would be too easy. I wanted something that would sit with her forever. Something she couldn't escape no matter how hard she tried. I booked the flights. Arranged the itinerary. Smiled when she wrapped her arms around me and whispered, I love you. Liar. When the day finally arrived, she was buzzing with excitement. Dressed in her best travel outfit, designer luggage in hand, posting pictures about our romantic getaway before we even left the house. I watched her, amused. She had no idea that this wasn't a vacation. It was an execution. A quiet, clean one, where the only thing dying was the life she thought she had. The first part of the trip went exactly as planned. Everything was perfect on the surface. And that's the beauty of real revenge. It doesn't come in anger, in shouting matches or dramatic confrontations. It comes in silence, and letting them dig their own grave, believing they're still standing on solid ground. She had no idea that by the time we landed, she had already lost. I used to believe that happiness was simple, that if you built a good life, worked hard, and loved the right person, everything else would fall into place. And for the longest time, I thought I had done just that. My life was structured, predictable in all the right ways. I woke up every morning to the scent of fresh coffee brewing in the kitchen, the quiet hum of my wife moving around, getting ready for her day. Our routines were synchronized, effortless in a way that only comes from years of being together. Breakfast was always the same: eggs, toast, and a half smile from her as she scrolled through her phone, sipping on her overpriced oat milk latte. "You should really try this," she'd say every few months, nudging her cup toward me. I never did. Just like she never stopped trying. It was one of those small, unimportant things that made a marriage feel like home. Our house was nothing extravagant, but it was ours. A modern, well-kept place in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people waved to each other but never pried too much. My office was on the second floor, a space filled with clean lines and just enough disorder to remind me I was always working on something. She had her own little corner downstairs, a reading nook by the window where she curled up with her books, pretending she wasn't listening to whatever podcast was playing in the background. We weren't perfect. No couple is. There were little arguments about nothing, whose turn it was to take out the trash, why she left cabinet doors open, why I sometimes worked too late. But they never lasted long. We were too comfortable with each other, too settled in our roles. I thought that was a good thing. Stability. Weekends were our time. Brunch at the same cafe, a slow stroll through the city, laughing about inside jokes that made no sense to anyone but us. She'd slip her hand into mine absent-mindedly, a habit more than anything else. At night, we'd cook together. She always insisted on chopping the vegetables because she didn't trust me with a knife, and I'd handle the grilling. Then we'd sit on the couch, legs tangled, watching whatever show we were half invested in. It was easy. Simple. But now, looking back, I see the cracks. They were small at first, almost invisible. The way her phone was always face down. The subtle change in her scent, not a new perfume, but something different, something not meant for me. The way she sometimes laughed at her texts, biting her lip as if she was holding back something meant for someone else. I ignored it. Because that's what you do when you're happy, right? You trust. You assume the best. Even when she started working late more often, I brushed it off. She was ambitious, driven. She had always been. "It's just a busy season," she'd say, kissing me on the cheek before slipping out the door. And I believed her. Because why wouldn't I? I remember the last truly good night we had. It was a Friday. She had come home late but brought my favorite takeout with her, a small peace offering for missing dinner. We ate on the balcony, the city lights flickering in the distance, talking about nothing and everything. She rested her head on my shoulder, tracing lazy patterns on my arm, and for a moment, everything felt just as it should. Whole. Solid. If I had known then what I know now, I would have paid more attention. To the way she hesitated before unlocking her phone. To the distant look in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching. To the way she held me that night, not with love, but with guilt. I should have seen it. But the thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't crash through the door screaming. It slips in quietly, making itself at home while you're too distracted by the warmth of what you think you have. And by the time you notice, it's already too late. It started with something small. It always does. Not a dramatic confession, not a lipstick stain on a collar, not even the classic late-night messages that light up a screen in the dark. No, the first crack in the illusion was something almost insignificant, so small that another man might have dismissed it. But I'm not another man. It was a Tuesday evening, and she was in the kitchen, humming softly as she washed the dishes. I was sitting in the living room, absently scrolling through my emails, half listening to the sound of running water and clinking plates. Then her phone buzzed. One buzz. Then another. Then silence. I glanced over without thinking. It was face down, as always. That wasn't new. What was new was how fast she moved to pick it up, how she wiped her hands almost too quickly, her breath catching just slightly as she swiped at the screen. And then, just for a second, less than a second, she turned her body away from me. A shift so subtle that most people wouldn't even notice. But I did. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I watched. She stared at her phone, fingers hovering over the screen as if deciding whether to reply. Then, in one smooth motion, she locked it and placed it back down. Face down. She turned back to the sink, but something was off now. The humming had stopped. I felt it in my gut, a slow, creeping unease, like the first hint of a storm rolling in before the sky turns black. But suspicion isn't proof, and I don't act without proof. Still, I tested the waters. "Everything okay?" I asked casually, not looking up from my phone. She hesitated. Another crack. Just a second too long before answering. "Yeah, just work stuff," she said, forcing a smile over her shoulder. Too quick. Too smooth. Like she had rehearsed it. That was the moment. The first moment. I should have let it go, maybe. But I don't let things go. I file them away, catalog them, and wait for patterns to emerge. So I started watching. Not in an obvious way. I didn't suddenly turn into some jealous, paranoid husband lurking behind corners. No, I simply did what I do best. I paid attention. And the patterns started to form. She was on her phone more, but never when I was close enough to see the screen. She started taking it into the bathroom with her, something she never used to do. A few times, I caught her smiling at a text before quickly locking it when she noticed me looking. Then there were the nights she came home late. Not unheard of, but different now. Before, she would walk through the door with a tired sigh, kick off her shoes, and collapse next to me, complaining about her day. Now, she was different. Too awake. Too energized. Like someone coming home from something exciting, not exhausting. And then came the biggest crack so far. One night, she was out with friends. Or at least, that's what she told me. I didn't question it. I wasn't that kind of husband. She had her space. I had mine. That was the deal. But something gnawed at me that night, a whisper in the back of my mind that wouldn't shut up. So, I did something I had never done before. I checked her location. She had shared it with me months ago, back when she had gone on a solo trip and wanted me to keep an eye out in case of an emergency. I had never used it since. Until now. Her wasn't at the restaurant she mentioned. It wasn't even near it. It was across town. A hotel. I stared at the screen for a long time, my mind processing the information in slow motion. My pulse didn't spike, my hands didn't shake. I just understood. There are moments in life when everything changes, but they don't always come with explosions or grand revelations. Sometimes, they come in silence. In a tiny glowing dot on a screen. I locked my phone and sat back. I didn't call her. Didn't text. Didn't confront. Because this wasn't the moment for that. No, this was the moment I decided something else. She thought she was playing a game. What she didn't know was that I had just entered it. And I don't play to lose. The thing about deception is that it relies on one assumption, that the other person isn't watching. That they're oblivious, too trusting, too blind to see the truth staring them in the face. And for a while, maybe I was. But not anymore. After that night, I stopped looking for reassurance and started looking for answers. No more giving her the benefit of the doubt. No more waiting for an explanation that would never come. She thought she was careful, that she was playing a perfect game. But what she didn't realize was that I had just started playing too. And I had no intention of losing. The first thing I noticed was the phone. The morning after she had supposedly been out with friends, she was different. Lighter, happier, like someone who had just come back from a vacation instead of a casual night out. She hummed to herself as she got ready, her fingers moving quickly over her phone screen, smiling at something she wasn't willing to share. And then, as if on instinct, she tilted the screen away when I walked into the room. That was new. I didn't say anything. Instead, I waited. And then, that night, when she was asleep, I reached for her phone. Locked. Of course. That wasn't surprising. But what was surprising was that the passcode was different. I tried the old one, her birthday. Nothing. I tried the second one she had used before, our anniversary. Still nothing. She had changed it. That was all the confirmation I needed. But I wasn't stupid. Going after the phone was amateur work. That's what men do when they're desperate, when they let emotions cloud their judgment. I wasn't desperate. I was patient. And patience wins wars. I started small, gathering the pieces. Her schedule had changed, subtly but noticeably. More late nights at work, more spontaneous errands that took longer than they should have. I made a habit of casually asking where she was going, watching her reactions carefully. The answers were always smooth, effortless, too effortless. But the real tell wasn't in her words. It was in her eyes. The split-second hesitation before she spoke, the way she briefly glanced away before answering. I knew those signs well. I had used them myself when bluffing in negotiations. It was the face of someone who believed they were still in control. She wasn't. Next came the financials. I had access to all our joint accounts, of course, but I knew she had her own. A separate one she used for personal expenses. She had always been careful with money, until recently. A few large withdrawals, random transactions at places she never mentioned. One from a hotel. Another from a restaurant I knew I'd never been to with her. She thought using her personal account would keep it hidden. She forgot that every system has loopholes. Then, there were the small things. A new perfume, something musky, heavier than what she normally wore. A different shade of lipstick, one I had never seen before. And then, the real kicker, her gym bag. She always kept it in the closet. Same spot, never moved. But one day, I noticed something strange. It was in the laundry room, slightly open, and inside, nestled among her workout clothes, was a neatly folded dress. A dress I had never seen her wear. Not to the gym. Not to any event. Not for me. She wasn't even trying to be careful anymore. That was the arrogance of someone who thought they were untouchable. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because confrontation means giving her a chance to lie. And I wasn't looking for lies. I was looking for undeniable proof. So, I followed the pattern. I waited for another late night at work. Watched as she left the house in one outfit and came back in another. Noted the extra time she took in the car before coming inside, probably texting him goodbye. Listened to the quiet, content sigh she let out before she stepped through the door, like someone slipping back into their mask. She had no idea that every move she made was being recorded in my mind, stored, analyzed, mapped out like a crime scene. She wasn't just cheating, she was sloppy, overconfident, and that was going to be her downfall. I didn't need to search for more. The truth was already there, laid out in front of me like an open book. But knowing wasn't enough. I needed more than just confirmation. I needed leverage. Evidence. The kind that would leave no room for denial. The kind that would let me dismantle her life the way she thought she was dismantling mine. She believed she was in control. She had no idea she had already lost. There's a moment when suspicion hardens into reality. When the last thread of doubt snaps, and the truth stands in front of you, naked and undeniable. No more excuses. No more maybes. Just cold, brutal certainty. And when that moment comes, it doesn't feel like an explosion. It feels like ice. A slow, creeping freeze that starts in your gut and spreads outward, numbing everything in its path. I found out on a Friday night. She had another one of her work dinners. Another perfectly crafted excuse, wrapped in just enough truth to sound believable. I played my part, as always. Kissed her goodbye. Told her to have fun. Watched as she left, the same routine as every other lie she had fed me. But this time, I wasn't just watching. I was following. I had been careful up until now. Gathering breadcrumbs, piecing together the puzzle, waiting for the moment when I could strike without hesitation. And tonight, I was done waiting. She didn't go to the restaurant she had mentioned. I wasn't surprised. I had checked the reservation list earlier. Her name wasn't on it. Instead, she drove across town, through streets she never had a reason to be in, until she reached a boutique hotel tucked away in a quieter part of the city. Small, discreet. The kind of place designed for affairs, for secrets, for people who thought they were too clever to be caught. I parked 2 blocks away and watched. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then he arrived. Younger than me. Predictable. The same type of man who thinks he's winning because he's taking something that belongs to someone else. I watched as he got out of his car, casual, confident. He didn't hesitate. He knew exactly where he was going. And then, I saw her. She stepped out of the lobby like she belonged there. Like she had done this before. She was different. Not the woman who sat across from me at breakfast. Not the wife who kissed me goodnight with absent-minded affection. This was someone else. Someone excited. Someone reckless. She was smiling. They greeted each other the way people do when they're no longer afraid of getting caught. A touch on the arm. A laugh that was too intimate for strangers. And then, without hesitation, she leaned in and kissed him. That was it. The moment. The final nail in the coffin. I felt nothing at first. No rage. No pain. Just a quiet, almost clinical acceptance of what I was seeing. Like I was observing a science experiment, a test I had already known the results of but had to watch unfold anyway. She had made her choice. I could have confronted them right then. Could have walked up, ripped the illusion apart, watched her face crumble in real time. But that wasn't the plan. That was what weak men did, reacted. Exploded. Gave away their power in a burst of fury and heartbreak. No, I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I turned away and walked back to my car. Because while she was busy betraying me in some overpriced hotel room, I was about to start something far more interesting. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the city lights blurring through the windshield. The image of her kissing him, touching him, laughing in a way she hadn't laughed with me in years, it replayed in my mind like a slow-motion car crash. But there was no rage. No violent urges. Just a strange, detached clarity. She thought she had gotten away with it. Thought I was the fool sitting at home, unaware, trusting. That was her first mistake. Her second mistake was underestimating the kind of man I am. See, betrayal is only as powerful as the reaction it gets. Most men, when faced with something like this, make the same predictable moves, confrontation, begging, maybe even a sloppy revenge affair to balance the scales. But that's not how I operate. I don't act on impulse. I don't make moves unless I know I will win. And right now, I wasn't just planning revenge. I was designing an experience, one that would make her feel everything I had felt. Slowly, thoroughly. First, I mapped out her weaknesses. Not the obvious ones, no. I wasn't interested in petty destruction. I wanted precision. She had always cared about three things above all else: her reputation, her stability, and her control over the narrative. She liked to be admired, respected, seen as the woman who had it all. A loving marriage, a stable career, a carefully curated social circle that saw her as the gold standard. And the best part? She had no idea how fragile all of it really was. I started with her reputation. Quietly, methodically, I began planting seeds. I reached out to mutual friends, subtly steering conversations toward the idea that something had felt off lately. I never accused, never pointed fingers, just enough doubt to make them start questioning things on their own. The best betrayals are the ones people discover for themselves. Next, I moved to her stability. She thought she was secure, thought she had full control over our finances. She wasn't. What she didn't realize was that, over the years, I had ensured that every major asset, our home, our investments, even the joint accounts, were legally structured in ways that heavily favored me. She had access, but no true ownership. A careful balance that kept things fair until now. I quietly began the process of shifting things. Closing accounts she rarely checked, redirecting funds, ensuring that when the final hammer dropped, she would have far less to hold onto than she expected. Then came the real masterpiece, her control over the narrative. She believed she was playing a game where she dictated the rules. She was wrong. I waited until the perfect moment. Let her continue her routine. Let her live in the illusion that she was still one step ahead. And then, just as she felt the most secure, I began pulling the rug out from under her. I started with small, calculated disruptions. Changed the passwords to streaming accounts, knowing she'd assume it was a glitch. Moved things around the house slightly, just enough to make her question whether she had misplaced them. Nothing obvious. Just a slow, creeping sense that something was shifting beneath her feet. Then, I turned the pressure up. I casually mentioned work trips that didn't exist, planted small suggestions that made her start to wonder if I was pulling away. She had been so confident that I was the one in the dark. Now, she was the one wondering. And finally, I set the stage for the real blow. The one she would never see coming. She had always prided herself on being 2 steps ahead in life. But in the days leading up to my final move, I made sure she was exactly where I needed her, comfortable, unsuspecting, believing that her double life was perfectly intact. She had no idea that I had already spoken to her closest friends, had already arranged for key people to be present at just the right time. She had no idea that, while she was planning her next secret rendezvous, I was planning the moment that would turn her world upside down. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about control, and I was about to take every last shred of it from her. She thought she was untouchable. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The beauty of a well-executed plan is that by the time your opponent realizes what's happening, it's already too late. Every step, every detail, every seemingly insignificant action was already in motion, leading them straight into the trap they never saw coming. And that's exactly what I had built for her, a perfect, inescapable moment of reckoning. She thought it was just another weekend. She had planned another work event, one of those vague obligations she now used as a cover for her little escapes. I pretended to believe her, nodded at the right times, even kissed her goodbye like a fool who still trusted his wife. She left with the same confidence she always had, the same ease of a woman who believed she had mastered the art of deception. She had no idea that while she was slipping away to meet him, I was setting the stage for her downfall. It started with a single message. A well-placed, carefully worded text sent to the people who mattered most to her, her closest friends, family, a few key colleagues. A simple invitation. I need your help surprising her name with something special. Can you meet me at location at 8 p.m.? Of course, they agreed. Why wouldn't they? I was the devoted husband, the man who adored his wife. They had no reason to suspect anything. Meanwhile, I ensured that her romantic escape with him unfolded exactly as she wanted it to. I knew which hotel they were meeting at, which room they had booked. It wasn't hard, her arrogance made it easy. A few well-placed calls, a small bribe to the right employee, and I had access to everything I needed. The room number, the time of check-in, even the name she had used to book it. She thought she was being careful. She wasn't. And then came the masterpiece, the final piece of the trap. I had set up a hidden camera in the hotel room earlier that day. Not for anything vulgar, no. I wasn't interested in that. I just needed enough. Enough to show that she was there. That she wasn't where she claimed to be. That she had lied. The moment she and her lover walked through that door, the moment they got comfortable, I had everything I needed. At exactly 7:45 p.m., I gathered the group, her parents, her best friend, a few of our mutual friends, even her boss, who I had subtly looped into the invitation. They all followed me, excited, oblivious to what they were about to witness. I led them toward the private event space I had reserved in a nearby restaurant, telling them I had put together a tribute video for her, something heartfelt, something that would show how much she meant to all of us. They were eager to see it. I stood at the front of the room, calm, controlled, watching as the last few people took their seats. Then, with the kind of measured confidence I had spent weeks perfecting, I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. At first, it looked like any other surprise video. A few innocent pictures of us, moments from our life together. Laughter, vacations, holidays. A carefully curated build-up, designed to lull them into comfort. But then, the tone shifted. The video cut to the hotel footage. The time-stamped moment of her stepping into that room with him. The way she touched him, the way she smiled. The same smiles and touches she used to give me. The silence in the room was deafening. A slow, dawning horror spread across every face as they realized what they were watching. The betrayal was undeniable. And then, right on cue, I pulled out my phone and made the final move. I called her. Put her on speaker. She picked up on the second ring, her voice light, distracted. "Hey, babe," she said, completely unaware of what was happening. "I'll be home soon. Work ran late." I let the silence stretch for just a second too long. Then, with an almost amused calm, I spoke. "That's interesting," I said, "because I'm standing in a room full of people watching a video of you at a hotel with another man." The silence on her end was absolute. And then the real chaos began. Her mother gasped, horrified. Her best friend covered her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her father's face darkened with something between disappointment and disgust. Her boss, a man who had always spoken highly of her, shifted uncomfortably, realizing what this meant for her career. And her? She was still on the line, but she wasn't speaking. Because what could she say? There was no excuse. No way to lie her way out of this. Not with the evidence in front of everyone she cared about. "Come home when you're done," I said finally, my voice eerily calm. "But don't expect me to be here when you do." Then, I ended the call. The damage was done. She had spent months, maybe years, carefully crafting a double life, thinking she was too smart, too careful to get caught. But in the span of 5 minutes, I had dismantled everything. She had no control anymore. No lies left to spin. She was exposed. Laid bare. Exactly the way I wanted. And I wasn't even done yet. She came home faster than I expected. I had imagined she would try to stall, maybe even check into another hotel, scramble to come up with an excuse before facing the inevitable. But she didn't. Maybe it was panic. Maybe she thought she could still salvage something, spin a lie convincing enough to make even this disappear. Either way, it didn't matter. I was waiting when she walked in. She looked different. Not the confident woman who had strutted into that hotel room. Not the person who had kissed another man like she had no care in the world. No, this version of her was shaken. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her bag, her face pale, her lips parted like she was still searching for the right words. But there were no right words. Not anymore. "I can explain," she started, her voice thin, stretched tight with desperation. I tilted my head slightly, watching her, letting her feel the weight of my silence. Because that's what people like her fear the most, not shouting, not accusations. Silence. The kind that makes them realize just how little control they have left. She took a hesitant step forward, her eyes darting around the room like she expected something, maybe a smashed picture frame, a suitcase packed with her things, some dramatic display of fury. But there was none of that. Just me. Calm. Collected. Watching. "Explain." I repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. "All right. Go ahead." She blinked, caught off guard by the invitation. I could see the gears turning in her head, scrambling for something that might work. A misunderstanding, a mistake, a moment of weakness. But she knew that nothing she could say would make that video disappear. That moment in time was burned into the minds of everyone who had seen it. She swallowed hard. It's not what it looked like. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I leaned back against the counter, folding my arms. Really? Because it looked like you walked into a hotel with another man. It looked like you kissed him. It looked like you've been doing this for a while. Tears welled up in her eyes. Not real grief. Not true regret. Just panic. The panic of someone realizing that their carefully constructed world was collapsing faster than they could stop it. I swear, it didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. A mistake. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head slightly. No. A mistake is something you do once. A misstep. A moment of bad judgment. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Over and over again. And now, you don't like the consequences. She stepped closer, reaching for my hand, but I pulled away before she could touch me. That's when the real desperation kicked in. Please, just talk to me, she begged. Let's not do this like this. Let's just... I cut her off with a sharp look. She flinched, her breath hitching. That was the part that hurt her the most, not the betrayal itself, not losing me, but the fact that she had been exposed. That the world now saw her for what she really was. Her tears finally spilled over, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger. Just a cold certainty that this woman, the one standing in front of me, crying as if she were the victim, was no longer anyone I recognized. I'll do anything, she whispered. Please, just tell me how to fix this. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, finally, I spoke. You can't. Her shoulders shook, a choked sob escaping her lips. She was unraveling, realizing that there was no way out of this. Not this time. I let the silence drag for a moment longer before delivering the final blow. Your things are packed. I nodded toward the suitcase by the door. You're leaving tonight. She looked at it like it was something foreign, something impossible. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. I shrugged. That's not my problem. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg again, but I was already walking past her, done with the conversation. Done with her. Your cards are deactivated, I added over my shoulder. Your car? No longer in your name. Your access to our accounts? Gone. A fresh wave of panic hit her, and she stumbled forward. You can't just... I can, I interrupted smoothly. And I did. She had spent so long thinking she was in control, so long thinking she was the one holding the power. Now, she was the one standing in the ruins, powerless, lost, stripped of everything she had taken for granted. And I was already free. She was gone. Out of the house, out of my life, out of the carefully built world she had spent years trying to balance between deception and reality. And as I stood in the now quiet home that used to be ours, I felt none of the regret or emptiness people always talk about after a breakup. No longing, no second-guessing, no grief for what was lost. Because I hadn't lost anything. She had. The aftermath unfolded like a perfectly written script, one that I had authored long before she even realized the game had changed. The moment she walked out that door, the consequences began sinking in, each one hitting her harder than the last. First, there was the financial collapse. She had always thought she was independent, that her job and savings would be enough to cushion her. But she never realized how much of her stability was built on the foundation I had provided. The joint accounts were locked down. The credit cards in her name? Frozen. Her car? Repossessed. After all, I had been the one making the payments. The apartment she tried to move into? Denied. Her credit suddenly wasn't as good as she thought. Not after I made sure to retract my financial backing on anything that once had my name attached to it. She had no savings to fall back on because, for years, she had relied on my income to cover the real costs of our life while she spent hers on luxury and distractions. Then came the professional fallout. The colleagues who had once admired her suddenly didn't seem so warm. See, her boss had been at that little surprise gathering I arranged. He had seen everything, heard every word of that phone call. And while companies might not officially fire someone over personal scandals, reputations still matter. She walked into work expecting sympathy, maybe a few awkward stares, but what she got was something worse: silence. Whispers behind her back. A sudden drop in invitations to important meetings. And then, the final nail in the coffin, a reassignment. A demotion, subtle enough to seem professional but humiliating enough to make her understand she was no longer respected. She tried to resign in some grand act of dignity, but even that didn't go as planned. Because she didn't have another job lined up. No safety net. No backup. She was drowning, and no one was throwing her a lifeline. And then, the social collapse. That was my favorite part. Friends, family, acquaintances, every single person she cared about had been there that night, had watched her secrets play out in real time. Some cut her off immediately, disgusted by what they had seen. Others tried to be polite, to keep some distance while pretending not to judge. But people talk. The whispers followed her everywhere. The invitation stopped. The casual check-ins from friends became less frequent. Even her closest allies, the ones who might have supported her, had to think twice. Because when someone is exposed like that, no one wants to be too close. Guilt by association is real. She tried to reach out to me. Of course, she did. The messages started a few days after she left. At first, they were practical. I need to get some of my things. Can we talk about the accounts? I ignored them. Then they shifted. Please, just let me explain. I didn't mean to hurt you. I miss you. I let those sit unanswered, knowing she was watching the little read notification appear and disappear, knowing the silence was eating away at her more than any words ever could. Then, the calls came. Desperation creeping into her voice, her messages turning into long, rambling apologies that never actually took responsibility. She was sorry for getting caught, sorry for losing everything, but she wasn't sorry for what she had done. And that was the difference between us. I didn't play the victim. I played to win. And I had won. Eventually, the messages stopped. The calls became less frequent, then disappeared altogether. Word got back to me through mutual connections. She was struggling, barely keeping herself together. Moving from one short-term rental to another, unable to find anything permanent. Job hunting, but getting nowhere. Isolated. Unwanted. And I was thriving. I rebuilt my life with the kind of energy that comes from knowing you came out on top. I traveled, invested in myself, upgraded every part of my life that had once been tied to her. I surrounded myself with people who respected me, who saw my value instead of taking it for granted. I didn't waste time dwelling on what had happened, because why would I? It wasn't my loss. It was hers. Time has a way of settling things. It doesn't heal, not really, not in the way people like to think. It doesn't erase the past or make the pain disappear. But it does something else. It clarifies. It reveals. It separates the people who were always strong from the ones who were only pretending. And looking back now, I realized that I had never really lost anything. She had. It's been months since that night. Since the moment everything changed. And yet, I still see the echoes of it everywhere. Not in my life. I moved on, built something better, something real. No, the echoes exist in hers. The ghost of the woman she used to be, the one who thought she had everything under control, now reduced to whispers, rumors, stories passed around by people who used to admire her. I heard through the grapevine that she's still struggling. No stable job, no real home, barely holding on to the pieces of a life that once felt untouchable. She's not the same person anymore. Not because she learned from her mistakes, people like her rarely do, but because the world no longer sees her the way she wants to be seen. She's not the successful, admired woman she once pretended to be. She's the cautionary tale. The example people bring up when they talk about how quickly things can fall apart. I can picture her now, sitting alone in some small, dimly lit apartment, far from the luxury she once expected. Scrolling through her phone, searching for opportunities that no longer come. Checking messages that never arrive. Wondering if people still think about her, if they still whisper her name with pity or disgust. I imagine she replays that night over and over again in her head, the moment she answered that phone call and realized, in real time, that her entire life was coming apart. The moment she looked around the room and saw the faces of the people she had spent years fooling, all of them seeing her for what she truly was. I wonder if she still tries to convince herself that it wasn't her fault, that it was just a mistake, a moment of weakness, a temporary lapse in judgment. I wonder if she lies to herself the way she used to lie to me. The thing is, I don't think about her in the way she probably thinks about me. I don't lose sleep over what happened. I don't feel regret, or anger, or even satisfaction anymore. I just feel nothing. And that's the real victory, isn't it? Because people like her thrive on attention. They need to be desired, envied, chased. They need to believe they still hold some space in your mind, even if it's just as an enemy. But when they realize that they've been truly erased, that they don't matter anymore, that's when they really start to fall apart. She tried to reach out once. A single message, buried under weeks of silence. Can we talk? I stared at it for a few seconds before deleting it. No response. No acknowledgement. Nothing. She wasn't worth even a moment of my time. Some people say revenge isn't worth it, that walking away with your dignity is the best thing you can do. Maybe they're right. Maybe there's some wisdom in simply letting go. But here's the thing, letting go and making sure someone gets exactly what they deserve aren't mutually exclusive. I didn't act out of anger. I didn't destroy her in some blind rage. I simply made sure that the weight of her own choices fell directly on her shoulders, where it belonged. I didn't break her life. I just took away the safety net she thought she could always rely on. The net that I had spent years holding up for her. And now, she's exactly where she put herself. I won't pretend that this journey didn't change me. It did, but not in the way some might expect. I didn't come out of this bitter, jaded, afraid to trust. If anything, I came out stronger, sharper, more in tune with the reality of people and the games they play. I don't waste time anymore. I don't tolerate lies, don't entertain people who take more than they give. I built something better, something real, and the best part? I never looked back. She, on the other hand, has nothing but the past. So, I have to ask, if you were in my position, if you had the chance to take back control, to turn the tables and make sure justice was served, would you? Or would you walk away and let karma do the work? Because me? I don't believe in karma. I believe in action. Bye-bye.